Good afternoon. This is the last session with two papers today. To remind you, I was asked to remind you to register for the tour tomorrow. It's necessary so that we know the number of participants and take your phone numbers for communication. If you are interested in this tour and you still have not registered, please register your name upon the end of the session. The bus will leave Ramallah at 7:30. They say it's early. So we will meet at 7:30 and probably the bus will move at 8, but we cannot announce it. I didn't say anything. So we meet at 7:30. Winter time, of course. We're meeting near Alhambra Palace, downtown. We have in the last session today about the exploitation of Palestinian labor in settlements. And this is an issue that was repeatedly addressed in several sessions, and it raised discussions which I believe will be re-raised. And this is an important discussion. What are the strategies of the Palestinians relating to this sensitive issue, which is controversial? Because it provides a source of living for a large sector of inhabitants of these regions, but politically speaking, it was undermining the Palestinian national project, and this invites us to think of the nature of the Israeli settler colonization and how we can understand it. Our colleague Stephen suggested one of the means. Mr. Walid Salim proposed another way to counter the settler colonization, and I believe that this is a fruitful and necessary discussion. I will be moderating a final session with some final comments about the conference. It will be the concluding session tomorrow, so I will not preempt the sessions and talk more. I introduce our speakers in this session. Dr. Ethan Morton Jerome Abu Salim, who has a PhD in anthropology from Marcus University, and he studies in labor and political economy and Palestine. He currently lives in Amman. We have Ms. MA in planning and political development from the University of An-Najah. She currently works in the International Relations Department in PLO. We give the floor first to Ethan and then to Manar.
تفضل. I lived in Ramallah from February 2013 on the settlements. During the course of my field work, I traveled more than 10 times to the Jordan Valley to meet with Palestinians employed on the settlement plantations, to work with them, and stay in villages in order to experience their way of life. Child labor, horrific workplace injuries, no assistance to compensation from employers, exploitative practices that include lower wages or one-third of the legal minimum, and lack of adherence to health and safety regulations. All of these were standard practices encountered by Palestinians working for Israeli settler employers. The terrible work conditions and treatment of Palestinian employees in the Jordan Valley were by far the worst of all the West Bank settlements. But similar conditions also prevailed in settlement factories, construction, and services sector. All of these abuses were quite blatant and would take more effort to uncover, expose, and prosecute. Yet those who were charged with enforcing the law paid little attention and gave numerous excuses for the lack of enforcement. I will not spend much time today describing the labor situation in the Jordan Valley. I believe most of you know the horrific conditions of the workers. I will also not discuss the very important issues concerning land confiscation, water usage that's already been discussed, military restricted zones and military exercises that go on there. My presentation today will focus on two aspects that I believe are critical in understanding the labor situation for Palestinians in the Jordan Valley settlement plantations. First, I will discuss the role and importance of Palestinian middlemen as a central part of the labor apparatus. Second, I will describe the legal challenges for the workers and possibilities for them to demand their labor rights. These two aspects of the labor situation in the Jordan Valley are underreported and need much more attention. Admittedly, they are uncomfortable to discuss and complicated, and don't have easy or clear solutions. Lastly, fundamental to my analysis is to go beyond restrictions of nationalist discourse to recognize both intra-national tensions and that labor exploitation occurs in all jurisdictions in the West Bank. The Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority ignore labor rights demands of Palestinian workers and are not serious about upholding labor laws. Ultimately, for Palestinian workers in the West Bank, the primary conditions are pragmatic. The economic issues associated with just getting by, rather than political or national ambitions. Working on the settlements runs counter to national imperatives and to desires for an independent Palestinian economy and state. Yet there are limited work alternatives for them, all of which come with their own disadvantages. Work on the settlements can range from jobs where Palestinians make 2 to 3 times more than they could in Area A, to employment that is at the extreme end of the spectrum of exploitation, including child labor, extensive workplace injuries, health risks that do not receive adequate attention, and wages that are barely enough to survive on. Yet, with as many as 30 to 40,000 Palestinians employed on the settlements, such work is clearly an important part of the Palestinian economy to compensate for high unemployment rates and to provide critical income. I will now move to the Jordan Valley. Shaymat, my research assistant, leaned over and whispered in my ear, "A woman just told me that the middlemen in the village warned all villagers that they should not attend the workshop." In spite of the woman's threats, over 20 women and a couple of men from the village in the Jordan Valley attended the workshop to learn about Israeli labor law and their labor rights as Palestinians employed on the settlements. Most of the village residents were worked on nearby settlements that had large plantations growing a variety of fruits, vegetables, and herbs. There are almost no local employment options besides working for the settlers. Palestinian middlemen are employed by the settlers to hire Palestinians and supervise all aspects of the labor, from planting to harvesting and packaging. Palestinians workers live in fear of both the Palestinian middlemen and the settlers. If workers complain or cause any problems, the settlers will blacklist them, and they will no longer be able to work on the plantations. Fear of settlers and Palestinian middlemen and a complete lack of hope that anything can change are driving characteristics of life in the Jordan Valley. Throughout the workshop, women walked up to the front of the room where the lawyer and I sat to show us scars from surgeries on their hands. The women struggled to open and close their hands without feeling pain. They had worked for years cutting herbs and vegetables and needed surgery to alleviate the pain and allow them to continue working. The settler employers do not provide health insurance or compensation for work hours lost while the women are at home recovering from the surgeries. Many of them said that they had to stop work completely because their injuries caused too much pain and discomfort. The women also complained that they had to work at all, leaving their young children at home without proper care. Although they worked under horrific conditions, they also lived in fear of losing their jobs, as this was the only option to care for their families. I witnessed fear, distress, and anxiety again and again when speaking with Palestinians employed in the settlement plantations. They had been warned by the women not to attend the workshop, but they took the chance and came to share their stories. Yet over the course of the 2-hour workshop, any hope they might have had for a change in work conditions disappeared. A Palestinian lawyer with Israeli citizenship led the workshop in coordination with a Palestinian NGO. The lawyer had given these presentations to other Palestinians who have worked in the Israeli economy, so he came prepared with details on Israeli labor laws that he believed would be the most important to discuss. It quickly became apparent that the lawyer and the women attending the workshop had different priorities. The lawyer wanted to give his presentation in an orderly fashion without interruptions. The women quickly began speaking up, interrupting him, and sharing their experiences. There was zero correlation between Israeli labor law and the experience of the women. Nothing. The women's experience was that no labor laws were observed in the workplaces, and the settlers made no effort to follow the law because they knew the Israeli authorities would not prosecute them. The women grew frustrated with the lawyer. What good was it to learn about laws that were not enforced or followed in any manner? The lawyer kept trying to provide the technical details of minimum wage, health insurance, vacation pay. But from the women's perspective, why discuss vacation pay? One woman shared that she returned to work 1 week after giving birth. What minimum wage? They received 90 shekels per day, 10 shekels for each extra hour. That is less than half the amount required by law. The women thought the workshop would be an opportunity for them to share their stories with the lawyer and to learn about things that could be changed. In fact, there was no reason for these workers to familiarize themselves with the law because, in reality, the law does not exist for Palestinian workers in the settlements. One of the key points of discussion dealt with how to file a lawsuit in Israeli regional labor courts and against whom to file a lawsuit. First, the fact that the Palestinian middlemen from the village had almost all authority over the workers complicated the question of who would be the target of a suit. Second, the workers usually do not have any physical evidence of their employment. They have no contract, no pay slip, middlemen pay them in cash, and they don't even have a permit to enter the agricultural areas of a settlement. The lawyer was frustrated. He could not file a suit against Palestinian middlemen in the Israeli labor court, and it would be very difficult to lodge a complaint against settler employers and receive compensation or win a case if there was no physical evidence. When the workshop ended, everyone in the room was frustrated. The women had come hoping for tangible assistance regarding their situation, and this wasn't going to happen. As in the case of many similar workshops I attended during my fieldwork, the participants walked away with some information on Israeli labor law, but without concrete suggestions for change and for organizing workers. The new information, therefore, was of little practical use. The lawyer was also exasperated because he realized how complicated and terrible the situation was. The PA does not help those who illegally work on the settlements, according to PA law from 2010, and has no power to do anything when it comes to areas under full Israeli jurisdiction. Where the PA does have jurisdiction, Area A, it does little to protect the workers from predatory and exploitative Palestinian middlemen. The atmosphere of fear that reigns among workers coincides with their frustrations regarding the PA and the international community's abandonment of these workers. No one within a structure of authority, the PA, Palestinian labor unions, the Israeli government, the Israeli military, was taking action to change the situation in a way that would benefit the workers. The one avenue of recourse for individual workers occurred only after injuries or losing their job. That course of action is to get a lawyer and hope for financial compensation either through negotiations or a judge's decision. Even when the settler employers might have to pay a negotiated settlement, that has not prompted them to change labor practices. Now on to the middlemen, or as they refer to them in the Jordan Valley, the Simsar Simasira. In 2015 and 2016, the Ashtar Theater in Ramallah performed a play about the Jordan Valley and called it The Court, Mahkama. It is a play that does not flinch in the face of very difficult issues, including sexual harassment by Palestinian middlemen, pressures on children to work on the settlements, and lack of support from the PA for adequate schools and clinics. It shows the stark reality of exploitation both on part of the settler employers and the Palestinian middlemen. The actors in the play came from the Jordan Valley, so it was not a coincidence that they were willing to bring up the frustrations towards the Palestinian middlemen. The middlemen are a fundamental and indispensable part of labor relations between settlers and the Palestinian population. They hire as many Palestinians as requested by the settler employers and transport them from their homes to the settlement plantations. In coordination with the settlers, the middlemen take care of all necessary details from planting, harvesting, packaging, all the work done in between, such as pruning and weeding. They also receive money from the settler employers and pay each worker. A key point of information that I was unable to verify is the amount of money that the middlemen receive to pay the workers and how much the middlemen keep for their own salaries. Cash was used for all transactions, so it was impossible to verify the actual amounts, what the actual amounts were. What was clear was that they do receive significantly more money than the workers, and this created a major point of contention and hostility towards the middlemen. There are variations in how the middlemen treat their workers. Some allow for bathroom breaks and are lenient about the amount of work completed, especially during the months of extreme heat, whereas others abuse their power and are accused of sexual harassment, of driving workers to work harder and faster, which leads to injuries and eventually the employee's inability to do any work due to health problems. In some cases, a good middleman would give some money to help if there was an injury or need for surgery, but this was completely at his or her discretion. The labor structure and role of middlemen are also important in that they serve to protect the settlers from litigation. Because the work is done in the fields, meaning that workers do not undergo security checks in order to enter the work area, a work permit may not be requested by the settler at all, or if a work permit is requested, the settler keeps the permit and does not give it directly to the workers. This system leaves the workers without proof of employment, which in turn makes it extremely difficult for them to sue settler employers. The settlers rely on Palestinian middlemen to manage paperwork, such as contracts and pay slips, but the middlemen don't use any of the documentation. The middlemen are also a central part of village life and hold immense power over the workers, even though they themselves are under the control of the settlers. One of the reasons they hold such authority is that those who are employed know they can easily be replaced by the reserve army of unemployed Palestinians living in villages on the rolling hills between Nablus and Jenin. Thus, people are too scared to confront the middlemen. It's not a surprise that the middlemen continue to evade prosecution, since cases brought in the Israeli labor courts are filed against Israeli employers, not the middlemen. The settlers need middlemen in order to reap profits from the super exploitation of labor. And it would be a huge loss to settlers' profits if anything were to change the labor structure. It is here that the real importance of Palestinian middlemen becomes so apparent, as the middlemen want to keep the status quo in which they gain financially, but their role creates an atmosphere of discord and dissension within the community. The greatest fear of settler employers is that the Palestinians could organize and work together to demand their rights. But without the support of unions or the PA, and with a dominant presence of middlemen who discourage any organizing, it's virtually impossible for workers to come together. The opening vignette of this presentation mentions the fact that the middlemen told workers not to attend the workshop with the lawyer. It's obvious that the middlemen are heavily implicated in the ongoing exploitation and that they don't want the workers to become educated or to mobilize against the current labor practices. Furthermore, the PA has not taken adequate steps to stop the middlemen's abuses and exploitation of workers. When questioned about this, the PA officials will usually give the answer that the settlements are illegal under international law, and since 2010, the PA has declared all relations with the settlements illegal, and therefore the PA can't legally address the situation in any way. Of course, these arguments ignore the fact that although the work takes place on settlements, the middlemen have Palestinian identification and live in areas where the PA has some jurisdiction, areas A, B, etc. Even so, the PA's official position on the settlements, the PA's official position on the settlements make it politically untenable for them to get involved, since the workers are technically doing work that the PA considers illegal. Unions could also get involved in efforts to mobilize, organize, and rally the workers against the middlemen, but this has not been done. Because of the sensitivity of the issue of work on settlements, unions or other organizations are not willing to take an institutional stand on the matter. Unless external forces come in, such as the PA to prosecute the middlemen or unions to mobilize, it's difficult to imagine any significant change in work conditions occurring. The one way that Palestinian workers employed in the settlements have tried to demand their labor rights has been to sue, usually it's their former settler employers in Israeli labor courts. A couple of Palestinian unions in Jericho do help with legal services, and the Israeli labor rights organization Kav La'oved also helps in connecting workers with Israeli lawyers who will take their cases to Israeli regional labor court. The option for Palestinians to sue in labor courts according to Israeli labor laws began with the Israeli High Court ruling in 2007, when it ruled that Israeli law should be used for labor relations between Israeli settler employers and Palestinian employees. Prior to the ruling, a mixture of Jordanian labor laws from 1965 and Israeli military orders were to be followed concerning labor relations for Palestinians working on the settlements. The workers' hotline case, this is the one decided in 2007, included appeals and decisions at the regional and national labor courts, lasted more than 10 years, a decade, and highlights the complicated and varying interests of those involved in the case. For financial reasons, that is, increased pay and benefits, Palestinian workers demanded application of Israeli labor laws, even though this is akin to asking for Israeli annexation. Also for financial reasons, Israeli employers wanted the maintenance of the status quo, that is, no implementation of Israeli labor laws, so that they could more easily exploit the Palestinian workforce with lower pay and lack of benefits. This position in turn does not adhere to the settler ideology, which demands Israeli annexation of at least part or all of the West Bank. Following the High Court of Justice ruling on the case, labor court judges at the regional and national level have interpreted it in different ways, causing confusion on all parties involved and giving the excuse to Israel the policy of non-enforcement of labor laws. What the High Court of Justice did was, in fact, unprecedented, and this is very important, arguing that Israeli civil law in the West Bank applied to Palestinians who worked on the settlements, something that the Israeli legislature and the military have never done. One unique option that has been used by Palestinian workers employed in the settlements, specifically in Mishar Adumim, was not to sue their employers, but to unionize. The Israeli union Ma'an has successfully unionized Palestinian workers at the Zodfati garage. The garage fought unsuccessfully for 3 years to try and stop the union and prevent the possibility of a union to represent Palestinian workers. Again, this is Palestinian workers in a settlement business, a garage that fixes vehicles. In the only instance I am aware of, Palestinian workers receive all of their labor rights according to Israeli law because of the work of this Israeli union, Ma'an. The union is based on advocating for workers regardless of religion, race, and nationality. I would recommend, if you're more interested in this union, I can talk about it later, or you can look it up online and look up particularly the director. His name is Asaf Adiv. The thing is, I will also mention this union is very, very small, has very few resources, and they get by with what they can. And most of Israeli society is against what this union is doing. Furthermore, mobilizing support from potential allies in Palestinian society would be very difficult, as Palestinians struggle with the issue of trustworthiness and sincerity of an Israeli organization. And others will also question whether the strategy of unionizing in the settlements only further solidifies the legitimacy of the businesses and employers. Nonetheless, Ma'an will continue to do its part to advocate for workers. And if Palestinians who are employed on the settlements ask for help, the union will respond. In the short term, and possibly the long term, the status of the Jordan Valley is unlikely to change. Israeli leaders frequently mention the Jordan Valley as strategic and military asset. You've heard about this from other speakers. If that's the case, the Israeli occupation will continue. Is it possible then that the best way to improve the lives of Palestinians in the Jordan Valley is to organize and unionize the workers with the goal of forcing Israeli settlers to adhere to the law? One of the questions I often asked Palestinian workers in the Jordan Valley was, what would your life be like if you were paid according to Israeli minimum wage and if Israeli labor laws were followed and enforced? Instead of receiving 70, 80, somewhere between 70 and 90 shekels per day, they would get more than 220 per day, plus many benefits, including health insurance and transportation costs that are required by Israeli law. Of course, the added income and benefits would dramatically impact their everyday life and alleviate pressures such as the felt need to send their children to work. However, unionizing or other forms of organizing to pursue these rights requires a public admission that work on the settlements will continue for the foreseeable future. Such an admission would undermine nationalist imperatives of an independent Palestinian economy and state. Finally, the employment of Palestinian labor is an essential pillar of the settler movement in the West Bank. Palestinians provide cheap labor to build the settlements, and they also work in the industrial zones and plantations, generating profits and tax revenues that return to residential areas to build and enable the expansion of settler infrastructure. The settlers have been and continue to be dependent on the availability of easily exploitable Palestinian labor in order to ensure their success in expanding Israeli Jewish presence in the West Bank. With growing concerns in recent years about the BDS movement, supporters of colonization have emphasized in their propaganda what they perceive as benevolent settler employers, those who hire Palestinians and provide income. Meanwhile, supporters of settlements ignore and deny the negative impact of the settlements on the Palestinian economy and the fact that they are an impediment to the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. Decades of employing Palestinians on the settlements and the current political situation suggest that the status quo will probably continue. Palestinian labor on the settlements will increase, and Israel will continue not to enforce labor laws for Palestinian workers. The paradox is that if Palestinians are successful both in the labor courts and in the unionization, and there is an increase in adhering to Israeli labor laws, employment on the settlements will only become more attractive to Palestinians desperate for a job. But without political rights, poor and working class Palestinians will have little choice but to participate in both the economy and legal jurisdiction of the occupiers. Moreover, any improvements gained in labor conditions do not compensate for Palestinian lack of sovereignty and political rights. Ultimately, what is needed is citizenship based on equal rights for all citizens, which does not discriminate by religion, ethnicity, and race. Economic justice in which workers are protected and labor laws are enforced, and active defense against capitalist demands of profit over the rights of workers.
Thank you. Thanks, Ethan, for a rich paper and sensitive. We will move to منار. تفضلي منار.
تمام. طيب. تحياتي للجميع. بداية
the Palestine Studies Center for accepting to give me the chance to present this paper on the psychological and social determinants for women's labor in the Jordan Valley area that was provided with the small grants program in Beirut. And naturally, they do not represent the council that supported this study. But before going into the details, I have an important point that today I'm quote statisticians that they say figures are just figures, but all we need is just how to read these figures and how to interpret this and to reflect this in reality. So when I present these figures, I am integrating them with the comments and with the that I received during my presence in the field during my meeting with these ladies. A matter that further explains these answers. In some cases, they explain why these figures came this way, although there are previous literatures opposite to this. Again, also I'd like to point out that when we speak about the Palestinian labor force, be it within the Green Line or the Israeli colonies, we cannot, in no case, separate this from the colonialist context where the land, fauna, and flora are target to that Israeli colonialism, and this has not been secret. Even Herzl himself expressed this. He said the Jewish company was formed to be a major company to gain land, to grab land, and so you can call it the legal Jewish company, although it is purely it has purely colonialist objectives to turn the owners either to pursuers of their rights or into laborers. So they undermine all efforts, and so we believe that development cannot be done except with liberation. In an attempt to see the reasons behind this labor force, maybe we can contribute to formulating alternatives and suggestions that can contribute to ending this phenomenon. If you want to speak about the study and its details, we can say that the study came from the repeated discussion of the importance of engaging women in the labor force, and this is an issue of interest in world countries. Yet the United Nations Human Resources Development of 2015, development in every work, then there were many challenges presented, that were presented or shown that preventing women from joining labor force or getting decent work and reduces their chances to get decent work and human work. In Palestine, the Palestinian woman was not far away from these challenges. The percentage of women participation work is 19%, although it is 53.9%, and this is according to the statistics of the International Labour Organization. And unemployment was on the increase in the year 2007. The unemployment among girls was 19.1%, whereas in 2017 it jumped into 47.8%, according to the statistics of the Central Bureau of Statistics of 2018. this has its own ramifications and reflections on the Palestinian women who started looking for alternatives to face unemployment. And these reflections were varying. In marginalized areas, it had stronger ramifications compared to other areas that receive relative interest and development for women issues. So the Palestinian woman started looking for alternatives to face unemployment. One of these alternatives that was present strongly was the unregulated or unstructured labor market, which is not subject to any supervision and where all the different forms of violations against workers, male and female, not only female. Yet, for females, it takes a stronger effect or impact because their need to work is being abused, considering the unemployment. And also, females, by nature, they keep silent on the violations committed against them due to their need for work. One of the forms of such non-regulated work is working in the Israeli settlements. That is done, as mentioned by Dr. Atham, through the Arab Middle people or Simsars, who where several violations are committed in terms of working hours, the conditions, working conditions, and the pay and abuse that goes up to sometimes to sexual abuse in bargaining for their work. And this was with testimonies even by workers. As I noticed in the literature that I reviewed, be it either research or articles or investigative journalism reports. The last one is the Bloody Rehan film, where the workers spoke about the different forms of violations they are subject to. Nonetheless, women continued working in the settlements, and even some of them were looking for job opportunity in these settlements. And here came the question of the study. Now we are speaking about violations and abuse. Sexual abuse is a very sensitive issue. This is a sensitive issue in societies that are considered as sensitive. In spite of their knowledge of these experiences and the need to end these practices, and I agree with Dr. Atham that there is no official position to track these issues, and the unions attacked me, saying that we receive complaints. Yes, you receive complaints, but it's not enough to receive complaints. It's your position, but to follow up these complaints, and what measures are being taken to mitigate these violations. And the interventions that are done mostly are within security context, when they know that there is an attempt to mobilize spies, then security services intervene. Back to the question of the study, that in spite of all these discussions, yet women continue working in these settlements. As I mentioned, some of them even seek to work there to get job opportunity there. So, is this thing connected to their need and poverty, or to difficult economic circumstances that families face and decline of job opportunities, or maybe there are other psychological and social reasons that women did not speak publicly about them, that make them to seek to work in Israeli settlements. And all of this is to give results to decision makers so that they can provide practical solutions on the ground. I would like to stress that this is just a pioneer study, pilot study. So it was just simply to pilot the subject and to see where this takes us and what are the future horizons that we can. I interviewed 42 ladies in 5 different areas. We used a questionnaire with them. We had a number of questions that we gave, distributed in 8 sections, trying to find an answer to the question of the study. We took it from different dimensions and we discussed this with specialists in sociology and psychology so that to make sure that we are dealing with this in a positive way. Naturally, the areas that we went to were the areas that who responded to us. When we speak about settlement in the field, this is not an easy thing to do. It's a sensitive issue. There are threats from the middlemen, and so there's a risk that they lose their job. And there are other reasons that we couldn't arrive at. So in some areas, after even we got names of people to cooperate with them to meet the ladies, all of a sudden they disappeared. They stopped responding to the questions. They stopped willing to talk to us, and some of them even went as far as denying knowing about women working in the settlements, such as the governorate of Jericho. Governorate. The level of education for women that we met was pre-secondary education. A matter that explains some of the answers that we received. Questions were difficult considering their level of education, and they started work early. 59% of them, they went to work between 15 and 24 years of age. And this indicated that many of them, they leave school early, they get married early, and they are ignorant on many issues, so they go to work in the Israeli settlements. 0.6% of women that we met, they said they didn't get suitable working opportunities in the Palestinian areas. But 50% of them, they said the opportunities they received were better. So they were comparing between the job opportunities, and in their review, the opportunities they received in the settlements were better than the ones proposed to them. 47.6% of them work in agriculture, and 45.2% of them, they work in factories. And most of them are agricultural factories such as dates, grapes, and that after they finish working in the fields, they go to work in the agricultural produce factories. Before speaking about the main reasons and incentives, I'll speak about the different forms of violations. 92.9% they said they are not covered with Israeli health insurance. This is because they don't have written contracts between them and the middleman or the samsar. And so they know that samsar comes to agree directly with them, and their family or husband agree to that, and then they go to work. And they have that theory that whatever applies to other women applies to us. So many of them, they said that 64.3% of them, they said they don't receive treatment in Israeli hospitals. And 76.2%, they said they were not compensated if they suffer permanent disability due to work. And one of the ladies I met, she said she was on agricultural tractor. The tractor moved when they were taken to job. Her foot was injured, causing her disability. Samsar got rid of her, stopped taking her to the settlement. and even prevented her from accessing the Israeli employer in attempt to get compensation. As this is the main violations they face. As to the reasons that make them to go to work, I'll mention them according to the sequence of answers we got. 83.4% of them, they said that the economic circumstances and the need for economic need was the thing that made them go to work in the settlements. 80.9%, they said it is the difficult living conditions were the reason behind their work. And this is what we mentioned. The poverty, and especially that they are the ones who are in charge of earning a living. Especially that the husband does not work and women take up the responsibility to earn a living. Especially girls, they don't want to go to work in the settlements, so she takes up this responsibility and sacrifice to provide, to cater for their education and to avert her daughters that experience. 71% of them, they said they didn't get suitable working opportunity, employment opportunity, because they don't have university degrees. And this was proven because majority of them are pre-secondary school or pre-high schools. So they don't have university certificates. Also, 69% of them consider the high income they gain was attractive for them to go to work instead of going to work in the Palestinian territory areas to receive payment that is much less. Although in the settlements they are subject to violations and they do not receive even the minimum wage according to the Israeli labor law. Around 60% of them, they said work is comfortable, that it doesn't require mental skills, just steps they learn by heart, and by the time they gain the skill, and that's it. What is interesting is that women in the area are the ones who encourage each other, according to 59.5% of them, that peer pressure or that, or the one of the ladies says, okay, I'll be sitting at home. The other women will come and say, okay, why are you wasting your time at home? Come with us so you can spend time. Time pass. So women who are facing violations are encouraging others to subject themselves to that circumstances. Also, the circumstances of work in the settlement, although we are speaking about violations, and after the results, I'll present an experience of one of the ladies. One of them considered that there is good lighting, 92.9%, and 88.1%, they said there is clean drinking water. 85.7% of them, they said there are clean toilets with soap and paper, and so this is something good to use. And ventilation was good, 78.6%. The paradox here, speaking about good working conditions, during the period that I went to collect data, it was in between April and May when we had that strong winter and floods in that area near the Dead Sea. They told me that they used to work in onion. They would cut it from the ground and pack it to be ready from the settlement to be exported. They said, usually we carry 10 kilograms, but on that day they were forced to work. All the land was very muddy, so loads were heavier for them to carry, to take away the mud from the produce. So they doubled their working hours and they paid them as regular pay. So this was one of the paradox between the answers and what is going on the ground. Also, they consider the relation with middlemen as a relation based on respect that is not that they are not being abused, sexually abused by the middleman or to allure them. So this is explained as follows. In the 5 areas, 2 of them, there is a lady middle woman. So this female samsar is a first level relative of one of the ladies. So she doesn't put them to that risk. Second area, samsar is a first relative. Could be her brother-in-law or her brother. Or the third area, samsar was their brother. So these women do not face these issues. But on the sideline, they said, yes, these issues happen, but with women brought from other areas, such as from Northern West Bank, Nablus, and Jenin. They face these issues, but with us, we are no one does this to us. And this explains their answers. Also, same thing. They denied that the Israeli employer, as if offering them to improve their working conditions against receiving sexual services. And this is simply explained because they don't see their Israeli employer in the Israeli agricultural settlement. Their direct relation is with the Arab employer, in this case, which is the middleman, who takes up the responsibility of implementing all that is required by the Israeli colonialist. So all the violations are committed by this person, and he gives them the impression that the Israeli employer will be good, and if they access him, they will get their rights. This is the impression they get, and the Arab one is a bad one. This is as explained by one of the ladies. The lady said the Israeli employer is better than my brother and better than my father. This gives indication on how strong the impact is left, that the colonialist is turning in their image as better than the Arab employer. Nonetheless, and to conclude with 2 issues, in spite of all of that, women, when we ask them about their feeling in holidays and when they don't go to work, she said 90.5% they said relieved psychologically because they are at home on the days when they don't go to work, and 81% they said they feel safe because they are among their family members. To conclude with, as a pilot study, it was difficult for me to produce recommendations. Even this has revealed many issues to us in the research that needs to be amended, but I can say that there are future horizons, that opportunities that I need to work on them, such as to have comparative study on the incentives for women who live in the valleys and work in the valleys, and with the women who leave Nablus and other areas to come to the valleys to work. Also, I need to include a different sample and to have interviews with samsars with both gender, male and female, to see if this is correct or not. And an attempt, I don't know of how successful that will be, if there is a possibility to meet the Israeli employer, who's usually far away from the image, although they are an integral part of this. This is what I hope, and thank you. Thank you, Manar. We have 2 rich presentations, rich with their details and extremely important issue. Now we open the floor to questions. Carol, the floor is yours. Microphone. Then Ahmed. Both of the papers are rich. For you, Manar, if you can provide us with the average working hours of the ladies. Thank you. The papers are excellent and they have important details. I have two comments. The role of the Simsar is that they understand different means of evasion against laborers. They understand them, and he can evade the pressure of the laborers and how to use them. So, because he's Palestinian and Arab, then they bring the Israeli uses them to, and I know this, and I know names. Muhammad, when he sees the worker praying for more than 10 minutes, he'll tell him prayer is 5 minutes only. But if Moshe, then he cannot object to that length of prayer. You didn't know the length of the prayer time, but Muhammad knows. Also, the role of Simsar is that he shows, he whitewashes the image of the Israeli employer. He'll be sitting in his office while Muhammad is monitoring. And he's the one who shouts and yells at workers who cut short the time of their prayer and food. I tell them, you cannot waste time. Although he's just a worker like them and he gets a percentage. By the way, these issues happened in 1967, occupied territories in C area, in Area C, and also in Jerusalem. But what's the difference? Is that workers in settlements, they are not subject to the Israeli labor law, but in Jerusalem it is. So there is some margin of demanding for their rights. Another comment, those who suffer double abuse by their Israeli employers who enslave them, and if other workers can do same like Palestinians, they would be imported. And same thing abused by Simsar.
I will take two more, actually 3 more questions, and then we'll do the answers.
صديقي إيثان، أحد المقالات التي يمكنك أن تجدها في كتاب حر
So which means that as Manar said, Palestinians can
اوكي
بس كنت حابب اطلع بعد كانت استاذن بس كان يعني فقدت كثير لما حضرتش ورقة الأخت منار. وبالتالي هلا أنا اللي حابب أسأله إنه إذا يعني انعمل في مناطق مختلفة وفي قطاعات مختلفة، هل كل المواصفات هاي يعني اللي انحكى عنها أو الأجوبة متطابقة أو قريبة من بعضها، ولا في هناك اختلافات بين قطاع وقطاع ومنطقة ومنطقة؟ يعني هاي مهمة.
سؤال مهم.
الشغلة الثانية يعني يا ريت ينعمل، هي حكت الأخت منار إنه بدها تعمل مقارنة بين اللي بالقرى واللي بالمخيمات. يعني يا ريت برضه ينعمل مقارنة بين اللي بيشتغلوا في مناطق السلطة واللي بيشتغلوا في المستوطنات. يعني كيف ظروف العمل والمقارنة بيناتهم، لأنه هذا بيحدد شو عوامل الطرد وعوامل الجذب بالنسبة للمستوطنات. شكرا.
شكرا لك. أحمد، آخر سؤال.
يعني هو جزء من الأستاذ حازم حكاه، يعني هي قضية إنه يعني رغم الخصوصية السياسية للشغل في المستوطنات، بس إنه قضية إنه الناس قديش بتحب إنها تشتغل في المستوطنات، وبالتالي قضية يعني الانتهاكات هاي اللي بنشوفها كمان في المستوطنات قديش هي كمان موجودة في القطاع غير المنظم، اللي كمان يعني إذا بدك تروح تشتغل في الغرب بدك تروح تشتغل كمان في مزرعة بتكون عند شخص واحد فيش عقود عمل فيش، وبالتالي قديش ظروف العمل. وبالتالي هاي المناقشة وهذا المقارنة كتير مهمة. هلا لأنه كمان قضية الشغل في المستوطنات، يعني أنا التقيت أكثر من مرة مع طلاب ثانوية كنت في بس مع المدارس، كنا نتناقش في هذا الموضوع، إنهم هم بيطلعوا لهذا الإشي كتير إشي إيجابي، وكمان هم لدرجة إنه بحاولوا يقنعوك إنه الشغل في المستوطنات كتير أفضل وكتير مهم وأنت جرب وتعال. يعني كان بالطريقة هاي قديش يطلعوا فيه، يعني حتى ترك المدرسة للشغل في المستوطنات لأنهم بيعتبروه إشي جزء أساسي وأفضل من العمل كمان في القطاع الفلسطيني غير المنظم. وبالتالي كمان هذا يعني كمان هاي توجهات بعرفش قديش يعني بشكل يعني هي توجهات خطيرة، ولكن كمان إنه الشغل في المستوطنات وخصوصا في الأردن اللي بتتطلبش تصاريح، وبالتالي لأنه في انفصال بين المراكز السكنية في المستوطن والمراكز الزراعية، وبالتالي بتقدر تأخذ أي حدا، وبالتالي بأخذوا أطفال بأخذوا نساء بدون عقود عمل ويلزمش حتى تصاريح. وبالتالي لأنه كمان هذا الإشي كمان كله هذا بيسحب يعني السكان كلاتهم يشتغلوا في المستوطنات، حتى في رؤساء مجالس كروية كمان في الغور وهذا بيشتغلوا كمان في المستوطنات، واللي بالتالي كمان هذا بيأثر على حتى على توجهاتهم السياساتية للمناطق اللي هم المفروض يخلقوا فيها تنمية في تجمعاتهم.
شكرا أحمد. سؤال صغير، آخر سؤال صغير. السؤال بيجي بعد تعقيب طويل ولا سؤال قصير؟
لا سؤال على السريع بدي أوجز.
طيب.
الدكتور إيثن أحكى عن مسألة اللي هو تشكيل النقابات العمالية للضغط على المشغل الإسرائيلي والسماسرة. هاي من الممكن إنه يتم استخدامها كوحدة من آليات الضم اللي كان بنحكي عنه بالصبح، كيف نحكي عن مناطق جيم والأغوار بالتحديد. شكرا.
اوكي. راح اعطيكم مجال الاجابه، بس عندي ملاحظه سريعه على هذا الموضوع. في دراسات المقارنه احنا لازم نقارن مش بس مع
with comparative studies, we should also compare not just what we said, we should also compare decolonization cases, not just settler and colonial cases. These studies are important. So a historian, Frederick Cooper, who works on a lot of African cases, he shows how there are a lot of struggles with workers in Africa after the wars in Africa. These struggles were a big cause of how colonizers escaped Africa, and this is an option for pushing decolonization. So we shouldn't just give up. This is a quick option that we can use for decolonization, and we should take care of that. We should pay attention to that.
It's fair to say that, if with the Oslo process and two-state, of course, a lot of what I said is useless in the sense of, no, we should be giving all the workers to lead the settlements. But I think a lot I was doing my research, and particularly I could spend a long time talking about the use of labor laws, and I saw over 3-4 years how labor laws were being used and manipulated by the Israelis. And that was just in one field, but you could see it all across that, today we had a discussion about annexation. Like, this is being talked about, and this is very much part of the conversation. So if we take that seriously, the issue of annexation, whatever, we don't know what it would look like. Whether people want to talk about it now or then, the point is that the Palestinian workers in the settlements are under Israeli law. And I could go into, there's a lot of complications with that. It's not very clear with what the High Court ruled in 2007. It's been interpreted in different ways, so it's not clear cut. It depends on how individual judges rule on it. So, the point is that I would at least argue that this conversation is relevant now and could very well be very relevant if any annexation happens. And so I would hope that my paper at least helps start this conversation and have the conversation more. And I don't necessarily, I wouldn't say I advocate the idea of unionization, but I believe it needs to be part of the conversation. And I think particularly a conversation that we should hear from the workers, particularly in the Jordan Valley, where the situation is so bad. In terms of the law, again, and this is where it gets so complicated. The reason why the 2007 law was done by the High Court was it was Palestinian workers back in 1996 that were demanding that they wanted Israeli law on the settlement. And it was settlers that were demanding Jordanian law. And this process went on for 10 years where you had these parties, the perception being that they were acting in what people would think would be the opposite of what they would do. And you see this, I think this is what I would encourage in terms of research and writing is the complexities when dealing with these settlements, the complexities of the relationships that happen. This is not to undermine or to suggest that everything's equal and hunky-dory. No, there is outright exploitation going on. There are unequal relations very clearly. And yet at the same time, there is a lot of complexity between the relationships between Palestinian workers and the employers, whether it's in agriculture, in construction, in the factories, and I would just encourage more research that deals with those complexities, rather than just saying there's Palestinians here and Israeli Jews over here and somehow they're separate. It's just not the way, it's not reality.
تمام. كارول، كان سؤالك عن معدل فترة
Your question about the average working hours for women. As I said, there is no written contract that sets the number of hours and also you want the number of working hours. The number of years. Okay, let's see.
قديش بيشتغلوا كان عندنا
We had
في هلا احنا سالناهم يعني
we asked them, we gave them the option. Some of them spent, now I don't have the figures. Some of them have more than 15 years of working in the settlements between regular and seasonal work. There are some seasonal work, but some of them they are continuing the same work for 15 years. Every day they go to work in the settlements facing the same violations and practices. As to Ahmad's here. Also, the colonizer is smart when he puts Muhammad to monitor people. So it's good to be good for them, for Muhammad to be in the forefront. Muhammad knows, and the colonizer starts collecting information, gathering information about you, and he will learn that prayer will take 5 minutes. But it's good for them, it's important for them to keep good image and to keep Muhammad in confrontation with the laborers, so that they keep saying Muhammad is not good while Moshe and Yaakov are better. So by the passage of time, this shows that people start feeling that the colonizer is better than the Palestinians. Ahmad, yes, I agree with what you said. During preparations of the study, we were surprised that there are complete families who go to work, mother, father, and even sons. And they are totally convinced that working in these colonies as something that provides them with security, because when the parents go to work and take their children with them, they feel that yes, they are under their eyesight, and they keep monitoring their children while working with them. So financially, and a good choice for them. And I think Ahmad, you spoke about the lady who, or Dr. Walid, who said as her Israeli employer is better than her father and brother. Some ladies, the employer interacts with them in a positive way. He might send his wife to work with them to give the impression, or his wife might give the impression that she was not the boss, she's just a worker like them, feeling their suffering, sharing their suffering. And sometimes they do more than that. Like when she feels that a certain lady has some social issue, they keep contacting with her, asking her what happened with her issue, and they bring gifts sometimes to them. Let's say if her son healed from illness, they might bring gifts for them, and there are house visits. Sometimes they give them gifts like on holidays as a show of interest and care. In our view, if this is a policy, then for these people, they consider it as a positive value and a feeling that they miss. Many of them, they got married early, and she was the second or third wife, and the husband left her with the kids to take care. So she found that support. Even her family left her. So this woman found some care that she didn't find with her closer, smaller family. And thank you for the recommendation for Ahmad, for Dr. Munir, that I will take these recommendations into consideration. Thank you. هل بإمكاني أن I'm sorry, they're not using a microphone.
مظبوط هلا
Yeah, I mean, because in my research, I was all
في بحثي كنت في كل الضفة الغربية
and it is very different. I mean, that's
وفي
and completely different than talking about services and completely different factors. And so those have to be analyzed differently. They have to be different parts of the West Bank, and the experience of the workers is always completely different. The other thing I would add to it is that I want to say that I think it's important to understand the work on the settlements. And it's a quote I started with at the beginning of my dissertation. And it was this guy said to me as we sat for lunch after cutting and he said that he is الشغل معي الشغل عرب مش مهم كويس يزف. And I translated that as bullshit. And the thing is that you have to take that as a perspective of understanding so much of what is written looks at one sector. And it's the only way you can really understand it all is you have to understand, you have to analyze what is happening in Area A, what is happening on the settlements, and what is happening for Palestinians that travel داخل 48. And they're different, and they all have different stories. And they are all comparing with each other, trying to figure out what to do and how to manage it. And I think it's only when you include all of those that you can really understand what is happening in the settlements.
Thank you, Ethan. We had really rich and 2 days. I think we had an
أعتقد لدينا تدريب نظري رائع وغدا التدريب العملي. أنا أراكم صباحا لنكون على الأرض ولدينا خلفية جيدة من ناحية المعلومات حول غور الأردن وسيتواصل. غدا لدينا الجلسة النهائية والختامية والجولة الميدانية. شكرا جزيلا، يعطيكم العافية.